1, 2, 3, testing. 1, 2, 3, testing. 1, 2, 3. All right. Fine. One, two, three, four. 1, 2, 3, 4. Interment will be at Mount Hope Cemetery. The family will have Shiva for friends to call today from 3 to 5, from 7 to 9, and tomorrow from 3 to 5. If you further wish to honor the memory of Nancy Reitkopp, you may do so by making donations to the Brighton Memorial Library, to the Chautauqua Institution, the Jewish Community Center of Rochester, Temple Bethel, or the charity of your choice. From the book of Ecclesiastes, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time of planting and a time for reaping, a time for keeping and a time for discarding, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for embracing and a time for refraining, a time for slaying and a time for healing, a time for laughing and a time for weeping, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. It is now my honor to call upon Rabbi Rochelle Tulik from Temple Brit Kodesh for the recitation of the 23rd Psalm that you can find in your Sidurim, the blue book in front of you, on page 197. 197.
Before that. Esa Einai El Harim Esa Einai El Harim Me'ayin Yavo Ezri Me'ayin Yavo Ezri. Now let's please read together page 197. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. God gives me repose in green meadows and guides me over calm waters. God will revive my spirit and direct me on the right path, for that is God's way. Though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are at my side. Your staff and your rod comfort me. You prepare a banquet for me in the presence of my foes. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and kindness shall be my portion all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai forever.
Thank you, Rabbi. It is now my honor to call upon family members. We'll begin with Justin.
Thank you all for being here today to celebrate my sister. What can I tell you about my big sister? I had an awful lot of stories. She had nicknames, in case you didn't know that. She was usually called Nancy, sometimes she was called Nance, sometimes she was Sis, sometimes she was Sandberg. As in one memorable occasion when she was too loud in the lunchroom and the school principal came out and yelled at her. He said, Sandberg, I can hear that laugh all over the place. Tone it down. She was the first, of course, but that didn't last long. My brother John came along in short order. 4 years later, me, and then 4 years after me came Alan. So we had 2 boys and 2 girls, 2 older, 2 younger. There was a lot of sibling rivalry, of course, and a lot of sibling revelry. At our house at 147 South Erie Street in Mayville, New York. Again, a memorable occasion. Well, first I should mention the towel snapping event, which resulted in my taking over John's dish drying duties, and he got sent to the drugstore to work in the back room for our father. And Nancy had to babysit us very occasionally. Our parents didn't go out much, but when they did, she got stuck taking care of the rest of us, and you can imagine how much fun that was. But I'll give her credit. She never drew a line down our bedroom, differentiating her neat and tidy side from mine, which was not very neat or tidy. Somehow my clothes and shoes just never organized themselves. I was the tag-along sister. We walked endless miles up and down the hill to school with her friends, Nancy Lepresti Goodrich and Minnie Boardman and Ann Saxton, and I learned quickly if I was really quiet and walked a little bit behind them, I could learn a lot about what was going on with the high school kids, you know, who's dating whom, who's no longer dating whom, who's mad at whom, who got detention for whatever, you know. And I also learned how to be a friend from watching them talk with each other and walk with each other and spend their class times together. It was a very small school. There were 26 kids in my sister's class. There were 42 in mine, so that gives you an idea. She had to take me along. My mother would say, you have to take her with you and you have to bring her back. And we went to the park during the summer for swimming and sun tanning, and we'd go to Midway Park for roller skating, and we would go to the movies at the May Theater, which was just up the street from the drugstore. She was our pioneer. She got to do everything first. And she went off to college after she graduated. She went to Syracuse, of all places. Now remember, Mayville was a small town. There were about 1,200 people in it. And she goes off to Syracuse, which was a gigantic school, relatively speaking, and she graduated. She got a job in the big city of Rochester. Now again, remember, Mayville, 1,200 people, everybody knows everybody. Rochester, big city. So after teaching for a few years, she marries Richard. They have 3 daughters, who I have to say turned out pretty darn good. And she has grandchildren, and she dearly loved them all. So I've told you sort of what she did, but what she was, I have a prime example of that as her kid sister. Mayville had 2 parades a year. We had Memorial Day Parade and the 4th of July. Memorial Day Parade wasn't a big one, but it was a parade, and we would all gather at the school parking lot at the top of the hill with the school band, and Nancy was in the band wearing her gold and blue uniform, carrying her clarinet. And then there was the color guard and town officials and Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and Brownies, and I was a Brownie, and behind us all came the Sheriff's Mounted Patrol, except one memorable year, which is a whole different story. And before we went down the hill, some man came along and handed everybody a ticket for a free ice cream cone after the parade. You just had to go back to the park and stand in line. Hot dogs, big parade, music, speeches, ice cream. So down the hill, into the cemetery, have the ceremony, go back up the hill. We're standing in line. I reach in my pocket, and I don't have my ticket. I managed to lose it. Not the first time I've lost something, not the last time. And I was bereft. Now, I could go down to Sandberg Drugstore and get an ice cream cone at the soda fountain that we had. The idea was I had been given this ticket to take care of for about 2 hours, and I managed to lose it. And I'm standing there in public trying not to cry because I was too big and I didn't have any Kleenex or a sleeve or anything. My sister shows up in her blue and gold band uniform with her clarinets. And I cheerfully explained to her, had my ticket, lost my ticket. It's not the ice cream cone, it's the cotton picking ticket, and it's gone. So she gives me hers. And she doesn't scold me or tell me how silly I am, or she just gives me her ticket. And that's my big sister. And I knew that wherever I went, I could call my big sister, and she would help me. So Nancy leaves, well, she leaves a lot of wonderful things, but she leaves a legacy of faithfulness and intelligence and humor and laughter and love. And she was the best of us. So I say, excuse me, my prayer is for you, Nancy, that the God of all comfort, the God of all beginnings and endings, will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand.
Thank you, Justin. Now we call upon the daughters in order, Elizabeth, Caroline, and then Sarah. Are you coming together? Good. All right. That's good.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I think most of you know I'm Elizabeth, Nancy's oldest daughter. Thank you for coming today to Mom's funeral. It means so much to us to see you here and to know that some are watching from afar as well. I know everyone is here with us in spirit. It's difficult to know where to start when you want to share your thoughts and feelings about a person you have known your whole life and you want to do it now in these circumstances. It was very hard to say goodbye to my mother, even though we know she is free now of all the limitations she had to live with over the last year. How do you capture those thousands of memories and moments? So I'm just going to start with some words, things, thoughts that come to mind about my mother. Although we're all going to speak, these words and thoughts are really a collective from all three of us. My mother was a gardener, an avid reader, a book club member, 50 plus years simultaneously in 2 book clubs, a steadfast and loyal friend, a compassionate spouse to my father, especially in his last few years of life when his pain was great. A steadfast and loyal friend, a loving older sister to her siblings. She lost her mother and her brothers far too young, but she kept them always tucked close to her heart all the time. My mother was an excellent letter writer, a proud and loving grandmother, an ice skater, a storyteller who shared so many stories of growing up in Jamestown and then Mayville, talk of cousins and neighbors, friends and school teachers, her mother and father, and my grandfather's pharmacy with a real live soda fountain. We could only imagine what that was like. Life at Syracuse University and seeing Jim Brown play lacrosse and football. And of course, life in Rochester, meeting my father, meeting many lifelong friends, raising us, her children, working, volunteering. My mother was smart, witty, but sometimes quiet about it. My mother was a calm and steady presence in our lives as children and as adults, there for us in every way. Endless carpools and lunchbox lunches, a quiet supporter of all our endeavors, a Girl Scout leader and a maker of costumes. She endured painful back to school shopping trips with 3 argumentative girls in tow, and helped with school projects that involved drawing people with perfect mitten hands. Those are hard to do. Mom was always there for us to console, to heal, to lighten, to reassure, to laugh, to beam, to be so reasonable, to offer, "This too shall pass," and inevitably it would. My mother was apple pie and banana bread, beautiful baked goods made just so, clothing that was always just so. My mother was black coffee and barbecue beef brisket, rememberer of birthdays and anniversaries, beautiful handwriting. She showed up big to Camp Seneca Lake on Visitors Day. My mother was a reassuring voice on the other end of a phone line. Just a few specific memories of Mom I thought I'd share from me. The first one's funny. But there was a time, well, it wasn't funny at the time. There was a time when I was about 11 or 12 and I know Lisa knows this story, I was in love with Donny Osmond. And I felt very strongly that I should marry Donny Osmond when I got older. Mom came in my room, and I remember her sitting at the end of my bed and calmly telling me that he was Mormon, there were rules, and that he probably couldn't marry me. I was crushed. She was a realist. My sisters and I loved book club. Night at our house, we were supposed to be sleeping, but we'd get our pillows from our beds and quietly lay with them at the entrances to our bedrooms. Very quiet, or so we thought. We did that so we could hear the ladies getting settled in the living room. We loved the chatter, the clinking of glasses and silverware, and best of all, we loved hearing Mom laugh down there. I guess it was a peek at her life beyond her role as mom. At one time, long ago, I was dealing with a relationship gone bad. I was very young. I know Mom was listening on the phone and trying to say all the right things, but maybe felt she hadn't said all that she could. A couple weeks later, maybe, I received a book in the mail from her with some other things. It was a children's book called The Paper Bag Princess. If you read it, you'll get it. At first, I was like, why did she send me this kid's book? That's kind of a funny thing. But after I read it, I realized that there was a message in there for me, from her, about recognizing your worth, about moving on. I guess she thought the book might be just the thing I needed to show me the way, and she was right. She was a perfect mom for us. We were so lucky. Mom, we will love you from now until forever.
Perfect. Our mom. Oh, okay. She was divine, and I will forever strive to be the mother, the sister, the friend, and the spouse that she was. Our mom adored her grandchildren. She sent homemade cookies, created handmade cards. She played trains, a lot of trains. She played dress up and a lot of catch. She attended games and performances and kept very special scrapbooks documenting each one of them as they grew. Perhaps most especially, she made the most of the time she spent with them. She recognized each child's unique characteristics and gifts and was a very good consultant when Liz or I had parenting challenges. I asked my 3 children how they would describe Graham Nancy, and since they couldn't be here, I thought I'd share their responses. Janie said, thoughtful, intelligent, a very calm aura, cared deeply for people and plants. And Jack said, I always thought Grandma Nancy was a very thoughtful person. Everything she did was carefully considered in a really smart way. I would have taken her advice on anything. I also think she was really welcoming. Graham Nancy always really made her home feel like home, which we expect from a family, but I think can be really taken for granted because most people don't have that relationship with their whole extended family. When we would be in Rochester, we always felt like a tight family. And Thomas said, Grandma was kind and gentle. She always cared about the little details. She made sure the house was always neat and tidy. Grandma Nancy was the human embodiment of the feeling of care, the cozy, warm feeling you get when being cared for.
So I'm Sarah. I'm the youngest daughter of Nancy and Richard. I've heard many people describe my mom as sweet, kind, and caring. Great. And she absolutely was all of those things. But she was also the smartest, wisest, and strongest person I've ever met. Okay, as a child, I would have said my dad was a tough one. He certainly could be loud at times and intimidating, especially if you were one of our teenage friends daring to call us in the middle of dinner. But as I got older, I realized that my mom was right when she told me that my dad, much like me, was sensitive and stubborn. Much of his frustration came out of fear and caring. My dad loved us kids and adored my mom and wanted to do what he could to take care of all of us and to protect us from the pain of the world. It just came out sideways sometimes, a little sideways. So, Mom. I know many people say this, but our mom was the best mom anyone could ask for. She was the calm and cheerful steadiness to my dad's sometimes loud and sometimes grumpiness. I love you, Dad. She was consistent with her level-headedness, even in times of tension. Like the time my dad yelled at me when I walked out of the hair salon at 12 years old with my hair cut super short, just like the lead singer of Duran Duran. My mom didn't flinch. Or the time in high school when I decided to dye my long blonde hair red while my parents were out of town. To my horror, the washout dye did not wash out. And by the time my parents got back, it was an ugly shade of orangey pink. And I also want to mention that I had to take my senior pictures a few days later, so that was fun. Again, my mom didn't flinch. And a little side note, I continued to make many more bad hair choices in my life. Mom said she would pick her battles and that my bad hair decisions were not a high priority. There's also the time after I graduated with my bachelor's from the University of Maryland that I told my parents I was moving to Boston and then to Los Angeles to become a rock star. It's every parent's dream. I can only imagine the conversations my mom and dad had, and my mom trying to convince my dad that I would be all right. And for the most part, I was. I was all right through the crazy ups and downs because I knew I had a safety net and a support system back home. And when my plans went south and I returned back to Rochester after 21 years, I was welcomed back with open arms. Mom was always putting us kids first. She came to countless softball games, cheerleading events, plays, field hockey games, and recitals. She helped with homework and endless school projects and crafts, all while keeping our house immaculate, volunteering, and cooking full meals, including a dessert per my dad's request, every single night. An early memory that Mom shared with me just a few months ago, I thought was just a really good example of how selfless, how she put us children first all the time. When I was 3, Caroline was 4, and Liz was 7, my mom and dad thought it would be fun to take us all up to Brighton High School to watch the fireworks. We parked the car a few blocks away and walked to the school. As soon as the first firework went off, I started hysterically crying and covering my ears because they were too loud. Right after that, Caroline started crying. My mom, at that point, my parents knew there was no choice but to take us home. Dad and Liz stayed to watch the fireworks. Mom picked me up in one arm and Caroline up in the other arm and walked on a very warm summer night back to the car. Mom said by the time we got in the car, she was sweating and could not wait to roll the windows down for the ride home. However, as soon as she cracked the window open, Caroline and I started wailing again. So Mom, laughing to herself over our super dramatic reactions, suffered in the hot car with the windows rolled up all the way home. This was just the beginning of the many times Mom would put our needs before hers, and through it all managed to keep her sense of humor. So I'm just gonna fast forward a little because I could talk about her forever. Fast forward to about 10 years ago when I moved back to Rochester and my dad's health started to decline. My mom took care of my dad through those really painful last 3 years, and she did it with a quiet strength and resilience, even when I knew that she must have been exhausted. And then when my mom was diagnosed with Parkinson's, most people didn't even know until years later. She rarely complained and rarely let her hold her back from doing anything. Throughout those years, I'm grateful I had the chance to spend countless hours with my mom, making and eating meals, going to movies together, laughing and crying. Well, I cried about the state of the world. She listened to my work stories and encouraged me through my advanced master's credential program. Her health continued to decline over the last year, but I know she heard me in October when I told her that I passed my licensure exam. And I know she was proud. She was petite, but tough, and she fought hard through to the end. And Nancy Vivian Sandberg Reitkopp was beautiful, humble, brilliant, and brave. She was a bright, steady light in my world, and I will miss her forever.
Thank you, Elizabeth, Caroline, and Sandra, for beautiful, moving words. The author of Proverbs pays tribute to the Jewish woman in his chapter glorifying the Eshet Chayil, the woman of valor. He praises the Jewish woman, finding a virtue for her suggested by each letter of the Hebrew alphabet. In this poem, the author sums up his sentiments in the most moving tribute to a Jewish woman found in a single verse. Kamu vanea ve'ashruha. Her children rise and they call her truly blessed. Our tradition imbued the family with a sublime spirit of unity, transforming the natural social grouping of parents and children into a body that was linked together both by mutual affection and by sharing a holy task. It is a striking fact that in the book of Genesis, Bereshit, we don't find philosophical traits containing sublime truths about the nature of the universe. It is composed instead of stories taken from the lives of Sarah and Abraham, Rebekah and Isaac, and Jacob and his family. It is the account of the everyday life of these early families that becomes the sacred scripture. A distinctive feature of this model of family life is the eminent position and function allotted from the outset to the mother. To the Em Israel, the mother in Israel. And to her was entrusted the responsibility of the home. In her hands was not only the physical, but also the spiritual life of a new generation. If that role is accomplished with love, dedication, and great sense of humor, then much more respect we create for that person. Our Eshet Chayil of today, our Em Be'Israel, our dear Nancy, who was born in a small town in Jamestown, New York, who came to Rochester and met Richard through a mutual friend, who was followed, courted, and called many times by this wonderful man who was interested in dating her, who they end up in 1965, be married at this precise pulpit with Rabbi Karp and Chazan Rosenbaum. A couple that knew very well each other and each other's strengths and how much they needed mutually. Richard enjoyed Nancy's cooking. He loved going to the movies, trying new restaurants. People that got married at 28 and 31, quite old for that time, perhaps too young for today. They came together to embrace and to find that they could produce three beautiful daughters, Elizabeth, Caroline, and Sarah. A teacher by training, who worked at elementary schools and then gives administrators at Rochester Area Community Foundation, dedicating her life and talent to those institutions. Nancy identified strongly with Jewish values. A wonderful mother, we heard that already. Kind, no drama. Pure love. Smart, that waited for her daughters coming back from school to help them with homework. Someone able to read several books at the same time. Someone who created this idea of book clubs, two of them for more than 50 years. Someone who was there to edit your essays over and over. Someone who was there to help her husband at work, typing things for him, but also being someone where Richard found he could talk to and bounce ideas off. She loved what she did. She was loved by others. She developed not just colleagues at work, but true friends. Her volunteer spirit was felt everywhere, active with the NCJW for a long time. Someone who enjoyed, we heard a little bit here, taking her daughters shopping for clothing, but in preparation for the high holidays. An old tradition, just to get a new set of clothing for Pesach or for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Sometimes being the mediator in a home. Aware that Jewish camps are important for the foundation of Jewish tradition, and she sent her daughters to Jewish camps. Someone who loved to tour all houses in Rochester. She was able to tell a story. She was able to communicate what she was seeing, and she loved doing it. That gave her tremendous joy. We heard from Justin how much she loved her siblings, felt responsible for them. Someone who's a great baker, who you could have fun with growing up as a child. all the good stuff you want in a family. Friends of her daughters loved going home precisely because Nancy's home was special. Loved by the grandchildren, able to get down to the floor to play with them. As we heard from Sarah and Elizabeth, Caroline didn't make it back home, but someone who, after many years, still with open arms to receive Elizabeth and family and Sarah when they decided to come back to Rochester. Someone who lived and remember her siblings constantly. When we talked the other day, we concluded that she was that quiet strength that is so needed in so many times in so many families. Someone who would not dwell in grief or pain, lived independently until the last year. Someone to travel with as they went around Lake Ontario, the whole family, the adults. Someone who's okay living a quiet life, and perhaps for the first time in a long time alone after the passing of Richard in 2016. Someone who would like to be remembered as a loving mother, a loving friend, and a kind person. A person with integrity and fortitude. Someone who believed in doing the right thing, even when nobody was watching. And there was great stories about that when she realized, checking a bill of shopping, that she had not been charged some of the products that she has purchased. And she went back to make note of that so she could pay for them. Someone who will write those cards, birthday cards, with a letter. And that letter will have something meaningful and thoughtful about you. Not just a beautiful handwriting, but the concepts written there were important. A dependable, unmoved friend who loved you unconditionally. She was concerned also about the social unrest in our country, not just now, but even back in the 60s when she was younger and active. She believed strongly in justice and social justice. She was predeceased by her husband Richard, her brothers John and Ellen, survived by her loving daughters Elizabeth and Darren, Caroline and Peter and Sarah. She's cherished by her grandchildren Zachary, Vivian, Eli, Jack, Thomas and Jane, and her sister Justin, brother-in-law Howard and Ellen, sister-in-law Joyce, and many nieces and nephews, and you, dear friends. But now it's come for us to let Nancy go into eternity. Let her record show her true spirit. Her will be with us for a long time. We will feel her presence in our lives. It will take a long, long time, if ever, to forget who she was. May the good God, the good Lord, comfort her family and friends. May God enable you in many years of good health and peace to remain faithful to the highest ideals of your mother. For your dear mother is not gone forever. Her voice will sound in your ears. Her laughter will make you smile. Her beautiful example of engaging in tikkun olam, repair of the world, will be with you. It's a beautiful example of how to perform and fulfill mitzvot. May your mother rest in the heart of every one of you. And may your own world, your own attitude to your fellow human being, and to your own sacred resolve keep her in the bond of life forever. תהא נשמתה צרורה בצרור החיים, May the soul of Sarah Naomi, but Abraham, be bound up in the bonds of life eternal. And let us say all together, Amen. Kindly rise now for the memorial prayer. Again, we appreciate Rabbi Tulik participating at this funeral from Temple Kodesh, and to all of you from being here to support the family. El male rachamim shochen bamromim אמצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים לנשמת שרה נעמי בת אברהם שהלכה לעולמה בגן עדן תהא מנוחתה ענה בעל הרחמים אז תראה בסתר כנפיך לעולמים וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה אדוני הוא נחלתה ותנוח בשלום על משכבה ונאמר